what you actually do here is exactly the same as what you would do for the acid fast stain. Right? I'm going to take a little piece of bibulous paper. Right? Not too big. Just if it's too big, it's going to wick the stain right off of the side of the slide. You know, you want to make it so that it's not hanging off the side of the slide. I'm going to put a smear of Laterosporus on there. Okay, we've got lots to work with. Now, these have been stressed, I believe. Right? We let them grow up happily in their optimum growth temperature, and they're growing up happily on PSA agar. But then I think my technician stressed them out with heat. They will only sporulate when their life is threatened. All right, so hopefully here we'll be able to see spores that have been generated from that stress. Just a little bit of water here since we're taking it from an agar. I've got a tremendous number of cells on this slide. Now, you should let it air dry, of course, but I'm not going to make you stand here and wait for it to air dry, but I am going to heat fix it. And the reason you have to heat fix it is because it's pretty vigorous what we're about to do with the staining process. If you don't heat fix it, it's all going to go into the staining tray and you're not going to see a darn thing. Alright, so the heat fixed. I'm going to put my little bibulous paper over the top of it. Use malachite green as the primary. Try to keep this off you. You know, it's going to be hard. It's going to get all over your fingers, but if you've got gloves, I recommend you wear gloves. This stuff, it has components that are absorbable across the skin. Just be safe. So we're going to use the heat method here. Now, your textbook describes, or your manual describes another, it's called a steaming method, where this would go over a bucket of water. You'd heat the water from below, and the steam would provide the... Oh, that's a mess. Screw that. We're going to do this. We're going to do exactly what we did before with the acid fast stain. We're going to bring it up to the steaming point anyway. And you'll see when it starts to dry out, because it'll look metallic. When it starts to dry out there, just replenish it.
Oh, you do that for 5 minutes?
You do this for 5 minutes. Okay. I've done it for 5 minutes. Now, it's real easy to decolorize. I say that with a caveat. You're gonna create malachite green crystals, no matter what. You can't avoid it. They are notoriously difficult to get off of the slide, but they don't look like cells. So when you see a whole bunch of green garbage on the slide, just recognize it's artifact and don't let it bother you too much. But your decolorizing is with water, and you can't overdo it. You're going to use a lot of water to get that stuff off of the slide. All of the vegetative cells, that's the parent cells, they're going to lose their color. The malachite green is going to wash right out just using plain water, and they'll become invisible. But the spores, the keratin-covered spores, my skin is keratin, so malachite green really does like keratin. The spores are going to accept that stain, and they're going to resist decolorizing. So they're going to look like little microscopic emeralds. They're quite beautiful. I mean, it's a beautiful color. But to bring the vegetative cells back to visibility, we use the counterstain saffronin. We'll do that for a minute.
Aren't the spores typically smaller than the bacteria?
Yeah.
So that's how you can distinguish whether or not you have garbage or spores.
Now, what you're going to see here after you've rinsed off the saffronin and you blot it and look at it, There's probably going to be a lot of remaining alive vegetative cells, or actually they've been killed, but it's still intact here. Darn it, let me use a different color. Now, like I say, I haven't had a chance to actually visualize these today, so what happens tonight is remaining to be seen. I'm not sure what's going to happen tonight. Cells, vegetative cells that have generated a spore, but they're still inside, may not actually have picked up the malachite green. Right? You'll see an open space, an unstained area inside the vegetative cell, if there is an early spore present. And it may not look green. Now, if you were to do a gram stain on this cell, bacillus is in fact, I guess I'll go ahead and tell you, it is in fact gram positive. It's gonna, in a gram stain, it's gonna be dark purple, but see, this isn't a gram stain. Don't get confused by this pink color, because you're not doing a gram stain here. This is just a counter stain so you can see the vegetative cell. The endospore may be unstained, or it may actually be green. So hopefully we'll see this, and there might be some free endospores that have already been released from their dead parent cell, and they'll be just kind of hanging out, and they'll be that bright green color. Alright, now there are some caveats to this stain too. That means exceptions, or things to watch out for. Just because you do a spore stain and you don't see spores doesn't let you eliminate bacillus as a possibility. Because I told you that they will only sporulate when they've been stressed. If it's happily growing, you'll see a gram-positive rod. It may not have a spore in it. So you can't really use a spore as a true dichotomy, to eliminate this as a possibility, unless you stress it out, either chemically or metabolically, or in the wrong temperature, thermally, right? You have to induce the sporing process, and then you can do the spore stain to eliminate it. But right off the bat, here we're just observing. Now, hopefully these have been stressed to the point where they have spores. Another caveat. Do you remember the color of the acid-fast cell from last week? What does it look like? Pink. It looks pink. If you had a culture of bacillus as an unknown, and you didn't know it was bacillus, and you did an acid fast on it, and it had spores, the keratin covering of this spore may in fact look pink in an acid fast stain. That's accidental. The keratin is tough and it's somewhat hydrophobic, and it picks up this as a, so on and so forth. You're using the same mechanism to stain the spores as we use to stain the acid-fast cells. If you ran spores through an acid-fast stain, you might say, oh yeah, those must be acid-fast cells, but they aren't. The acid-fast cells would be a mycobacterium, and they're long, skinny rods. But see, these aren't long, skinny rods. These are more or less ovoid in shape. Right? So you got to be aware of that. If you ran sporulating bacillus through an acid fast, you might get a false positive for acid fast. If you ran a mycobacterium through a spore stain, they might actually retain the malachite green. They might show up as green, but their shape is still going to be long, skinny rods. So be aware that the shape of a mycobacterium and the shape of a spore is real different. That's how you get them. That's how you prevent the confusion of the colors. Everybody know what I'm talking about here? All right. All right. So if I were steaming it for 5 minutes, I'd dump the stain out into the tray. I just decolorize with copious amounts of water. It's going to take lots of water. You're not going to get all the malachite green off the slide no matter what you do. But when you're satisfied that no more green is coming off, use safranin for 1 minute, rinse it, blot it, look for these. And that's your endospore.